Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I am your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome back to the Kiana Canada Show. Before we get into tonight's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that your likes and your shares, what it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that videos like this are important, but we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm, that is not an indication that videos like this are not important. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also follow me on Facebook by searching for my name. That is Kiana Canada, Q-U-I-A-N-N-A. I will link my Facebook account in the description box below. It's important to understand that I only have two social media accounts that I am active on. That is Facebook as well as this YouTube channel, which the handle is @RealKianaCanada. Now, the other accounts that I have, such as Substack and LinkedIn, TikTok, these are being occupied by Irish American cyber hackers. I explain in detail about this on my YouTube channel. You can watch videos about who I think is really behind this occupation of my social media accounts and what I'm doing to stop it. Tonight, what we are going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is facadism. And I thought up here I have a book. Well, it's way at the very top. It's like on this third shelf up here. It's a dictionary of geography. And I thought that in this dictionary, there would be like an entry that is related to facadism or Potemkin villages. And before we get into this discussion, I want to structure this video with a definition. And because I don't have, I guess I'll need to go to the library and do more research on this topic. But what we have right now is just a handy dictionary. So there's going to be two definitions that I'm going to be reading to you, which is facadism and Potemkin. And these are going to structure the video about what we'll be speaking about tonight. So facade is defined as the principal front of a building that faces on the street or open space. And that's like the first definition. So I think essentially what this definition is telling us in summary, or just concisely, is that the front of a building looks as if it is functional, but if you go around to the back or even to the side, you can see that, you know, it's probably not functional. It's probably not a real what it's purporting to show in the front. The second definition is a deceptive outward appearance. And so that is, I think the second definition is what we'll be using to really structure this video on facadism and Potemkin villages. Now, the definition for Potemkin in the dictionary is having a false or deceptive appearance, especially one presented for the purpose of propaganda. And that is going to be what we are going to be structuring this video. Now, when we talk about this, I intend for the contributions that I present to you to be true. And it is my honest opinion that there are Potemkin organizations and structures here in Northern Ireland. And you may say, well, Kiana, like, what does that mean? Essentially, what I think is happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that There is a two-tier system in Northern Ireland, one for Irish people. And so the two-tier system is one for Irish people and minorities that are falling in line with the status quo. And then the second is, I guess, below this first tier, which is for everybody else that is not falling in line with the status quo. And the status quo could be anything. So for example, the status quo could be a political ideology. The status quo could be like the prevailing ideology at the moment that is being, I guess, pushed in a way, propelled through the political institutions that are located here in Northern Ireland. The status quo could be racism, anti-Black racism. The status quo could be discrimination against particular sectors of the population, whether that is discrimination against Protestants, whether that's discrimination against Catholics. The status quo is broad, as you can see. But what I've learned since I've been living in Northern Ireland is that there are there are alleged institutions that you can find online that are not actually physical in its tangible sense within Belfast. Now, I live in Belfast. I don't live in any other place in Northern Ireland. So I'm only specifically talking about Belfast. To be clear, if you look up a certain organization or you look up a particular institution or departmental office, there is often a website for these agencies or these departmental offices, and they don't actually have a physical office. And you may say, well, Kiana, what's the problem with that? Many organizations are just starting out, and because they are in, I guess, the inception phase, the starting phase of their, I guess, their conception, right? Most organizations or institutions that are in its beginning phase, they don't have a physical office, right? We know like activists and social groups, social movements often don't have a physical office, but they do have like a Facebook profile or Instagram profile, or they have a website because it's a group of activists and they're coming together, but they don't have like an office where they meet at. And that's understandable, and that's not what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about government departments that don't actually have a physical office here in Belfast, which falls under the definition of facadism or a Potemkin village. I'll give you an example of a Potemkin village in Northern Ireland. I went to the Law Society one day and I was looking to learn more about instructing a solicitor for my case, and which was an immigration solicitor. And the security guard at the Law Society, the security guard at the Law Society's desk, he gave me an address and gave me a name of an institution that he alleged provided services to immigrants or migrants or asylum seekers, which was, these services were legal in nature and represented asylum seekers in their legal claims. Now, when I went to this address and I, looked it over, saw that the address was at the place where I was standing in front of, I realized that this was an empty building that didn't have any offices within it to represent asylum seekers or immigrants in Northern Ireland. There is, and you may say, well, Kiana, maybe they moved. That is a possibility. That is plausible. I'm not saying that they didn't move. I'm not saying that they didn't move to a different address. It is very likely that they could have moved to a different address, but one would think that that information would have been updated and the Law Society would have had that information, on its roster. It's important for me to say that at the time that this person gave me this information, I had asked him, was this information up to date? And he said that it was up to date. So I was under the impression that I was going to a business that was functioning, that was up to date. And then when I arrived at the address, the office was completely empty. How I know the office was completely empty was because there were construction workers working in this building, and I said, I was sent here. I said I was right. The Law Society sent me here because they're saying that there is the law center within this building. And the the construction worker was like, no, there's nothing in this office. And he took me around, and the entire building was empty. And it was only, I think, 3 floors or 2 to 3 floors. So you can see that this is an example of facadism, where there is an institution that is purporting to be one thing when there's really nothing there. It's quite deceptive. Now, did the security guard intend to send me to an office that he knew or should have known was empty and that immigration services was not in this office? I don't know, and we probably won't ever know, because I probably won't go and ask him unless I am compelled to. And so the purpose of, I think, of this exchange that we're having about Potemkin villages is that there was a governmental agency here in Northern Ireland, and quite a few of them purporting or alleging to be governmental agencies. Now, I'm not going to say the names right now because anything could happen from this point and the point that I decide to upload this video. One thing that could happen is that there could be more information on these websites related to these governmental agencies, or someone could be withholding information on these websites to try and discredit me as I talk about this. And then once I talk about it, then they upload more information to make it appear as if I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm holding off on giving you the information on these agencies. What I'll do is, on the day in question, I will possibly record these governmental institutions and then upload them to my YouTube page so that you can see for yourself that these appear to be Potemkin departments. Now, I want to avoid any obscurity or any ambiguity about what I'm seeing online. So when I'm going to government pages, so for example, if there is a commission, an appeals commission, so if you're appealing a specific process here in Northern Ireland, there is viewers or persons that are viewing a website, they're being directed to a specific page. And the page is a website, and the website looks legit, but there is like no structure. There's not a leadership structure, and usually there is not an address, and there is no contact information. And I think that that is a sign for us. Those are telltale signs of a Potemkin organization or a Potemkin business or a Potemkin department. Even if it says that it is operating under the auspices, right? Operating in Northern Ireland, operating legally as a governmental agency, operating as a department in Northern Ireland, well, there still needs to be a functioning leadership that is accessible and open to the public. So for example, if I go to a website and I am going to appeal something to a commission or an ombudsman, which is a public body, I need to be able to know, and not only do I need to know that, but you need to know as probably a citizen of Northern Ireland or an immigrant or an asylum seeker here in Northern Ireland, you need to know what the leadership structure is. You need to know what the address is of this particular institution. You need to know what the contact information is of this particular institution. And why I'm deeply concerned about a number of these websites that are operating in Northern Ireland is because this is often a sign of transnational repression. So if you have been watching my videos, there is a structured definition for transnational repression. I just give a concise one. I wasn't the person that came up with transnational repression. It was Dana Moss. And essentially, transnational repression is where states are using their tentacles to reach across their borders to silence the dissent of diaspora communities, immigrants, journalists, human rights defenders, etc. And they use their information gathering capacities, intelligence capacities, confidential informants to do just that. And silencing dissent can come in a number of ways. Silencing dissent could be through through blackmail, smear campaigns, through intimidation, through threats, assault, and in the most extreme cases, through unalivement. And what we've learned as researchers of this kind of political repression is that it is often not only the country of origin that is seeking to silence the dissent of its own citizens, but sometimes a foreign state or a foreign country could silence the dissent of a foreign national. It need not be that person's country that is seeking to silence their dissent. And so what I'm deeply concerned about what I'm seeing online is oftentimes people who are going through political repression, especially in Belfast, the Republic of Ireland, what we'll see is these false websites being erected. And when a person who is going through transnational repression is seeking justice or trying to access justice, oftentimes they will be directed to these Potemkin websites, which is their country or some kind of information gathering agency or some intelligence agency operating behind these websites. So an ordinary person, you know, a naive person would often think that they are communicating with an actual entity or an actual person. Well, they're communicating with an actual person, but they would think that this is a legitimate organization or a legitimate person in the structure that they're communicating with, when in reality it is either their country of origin, such as an intelligence agency, an information gathering agency, or it could even be a transnational organized crime group that is behind these false websites that are being erected to cause doubt and confusion about in the mind of the person as they attempt to try and access justice. Now, accessing justice could be accessing the courts, going physically into a court, filing a petition, filing a complaint with a court. But accessing justice does not necessarily stop there, ladies and gentlemen. Accessing justice is really going through the entire process, making sure that the process is accessible to a litigant in person, accessible to a person that is seeking to vindicate a specific claim. And it needs to be accessible, not in the physical sense, but in the literal sense. It needs to be accessible from the time that a person walks into a courthouse, when they file their petitions and their complaints, when they are speaking to, say for instance, in Northern Ireland, the central office, and the information that the central office, the information that they're providing to the litigant needs to be update, it needs to be accurate, and it need not be deceptive, right? It should not be deceptive. And so I'm bringing that to your attention because I think what I want to do is look into these websites that's being erected in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. So for instance, I had called a number today that purported to be the number of a governmental agency or department in Northern Ireland. And this was like supposed to be like a legitimate government agency here in Northern Ireland. And I asked, well, why don't you have a physical address? And the person was saying, well, we are not supposed to give out the physical address. But I said, but if you're a governmental department, you're a public body, and that's supposed to be open. That information is supposed to be open and accessible to the public. Now, I understand that certain offices are private, but if it is like a governmental body, such as, say, for example, the Northern Ireland Executive, right, which is can be located in near Stormont. Well, Stormont is open to the public, and you might not be able to just go in and walk into a person's office. But if you go to Stormont, you're able to do like a tour, and you're able to see where where politicians and legislators, their offices are. Same thing with Belfast City Hall, which is a government department. It's part of the city. It's open to the public. You can go in as a tourist, and you can see that this is Belfast City Hall, but there is offices in there that belong to the city councilors. And if you are a citizen or asylum seeker or a person within Northern Ireland, Sometimes you can go and meet with a counselor that is available in the city hall, which is what I did once. So it didn't register to me that this government agency, this website, and this contact number purporting to be a governmental agency didn't have a physical office in Northern Ireland. And why it is more suspect is that this government office is supposed to be one of the primary functions of Northern Ireland and dealing with the day-to-day aspects of the cities. So it makes little sense that that a website that is purporting to be a governmental website with a number attached to it doesn't really have a physical office. Now, if you live in Belfast and you can explain to me why important government offices are absent and have disappeared in Northern Ireland, please let me know. Like, I'm still new to this country and new to Belfast, which is this city. And so I know that that recently, within like a year or so, that Northern Ireland had been given a new government, and that there are 2 ministers now that are overseeing the country. But there is a functioning so the legislatures are there in Stormont, I think, and then there are governmental offices there as well. I've been to Stormont and I've seen that these offices are functioning. So it raises a broader question as to why this specific office doesn't have a leadership structure, does not have a physical address, and only has a P.O. box address. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think. Do you think that there is a problem with facadism in Northern Ireland, specifically in Belfast? Do you think that there is Potemkin structures in Belfast? I'll probably do some more research on this and probably take my camera around just to make sure that a business is I don't want to be a person that's going around, saying, well, hey, what's going on here? But if a person needs to interact with the government, they need to interact with the government, right? And having no address raises really serious concerns. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.